Budget, Steve?
Budget, Steve.
Yes, so this week was the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt's first budget. Actually, I think they said quite funnily on the BBC that his last three predecessors hadn't actually managed to get round to doing a budget. They'd been in and out before they did. And the last Chancellor to do a budget is obviously now the Prime Minister. So very interesting facts there. But I've pulled 7... and sort of 8, I guess, is a sort of a roundup of the other things that actually happened in the budget. But I've broken them down into little segments for you just to give you an idea of what happened and what was announced and what's changing for you. So on income tax, income tax allowances are staying frozen. This will likely mean more people jump into higher rate tax bands. We actually saw that a couple of months ago when we got when they got tax receipts in, and we had a big surplus at the government, which obviously gave Hunt a little bit of flexibility in this budget. But yeah, this will make it pretty much the highest tax rate that we've had in the UK since I think it's about the 1960s. So it's pretty bad. They call this income drag because inflation is obviously rampant at the moment, so the theory is that salaries will increase by a decent amount, but if you keep the bands the same, people push into higher tax brackets and thus pay more tax. But that was number one. So number two was work incentives and pension allowance. So a key part of the budget, a key part of the speech was getting people back into work. So as a result of this, they're going to change the way that pension allowances are structured. So before you could contribute £40,000 to a pension, that's now going to go up to £60,000 per year. And total contribution caps was, I think the total cap was 1.03 million or 1.07 million. I can't remember which one, but that now has been completely obliterated. There is no upper limit to the maximum amount you can contribute. Step 3 was childcare. Jeremy Hunt announced that there's going to be 30 hours of free childcare scheme. It's going to be expanded to children over 9 months. So when the maternity leave period ends, for the most people, there's going to be 30 hours of free childcare kicking in. It's estimated to cost about $4 billion. It's actually going to be staggered, so we don't get anything until, I think it was April 2024, but then it's going to be staggered, released on September 2024, and then there is another release after that as well. So, the Tories might not even be in power by the time this comes around, Steve, but see what you think about that. Energy bill support, they announced that they're basically going to extend the current scheme for another 3 months. So they're going to cap the energy price back down to £2,500 per year. This should give you an average family saving about £160. And he also announced a little war on sort of prepayment premiums. They're essentially going to be scrapped and bring prepayment meters in line with credit meters. I think the cost of this is going to be closer to about 30 billion. There's going to be in March 2022 we cut fuel duty by 5p. They were supposed to put that back on in this budget, but he actually chose to freeze it for another 12 months, which should save about £100 for the average motorist. Corporation tax is due to increase from 19% to 25% on profits over 250,000. They reckon this will bring in about another 12 billion to the Treasury, and it should only affect about 10% of businesses. Little statement on economic growth. So inflation was forecast to fall from 10.7% last year to 2.9% by the end of the year. They're claiming this is something that they've done. I'm not entirely sure they should really get any credit for it. They also announced that the UK will not be going into a technical recession in 2023. And after this, the UK will grow in years 2024, 2025, 2026 and 2027. And the number was around 2%. So a couple of extra little points. So there was a £63 million fund for public leisure centres and pools, Steve. That was one of the first things he announced. And you were like, oh God, this is going to be a terrible budget. We're starting with leisure centres. The ISA allowance, Steve, which is something we thought might take a whack, is going to remain at 20,000. And the document that came out after it actually hinted that it could be going up next year. So we will wait and see. 100 million going to the voluntary sector and to select charities, 760 million in regeneration projects going throughout the UK, and a little change to R&D credits, which is actually pretty good when you look at it for small and medium businesses. Essentially, any R&D spend they'll be able to offset against their tax bill, and it should be worth about 27 quid for it back for every £100 spent. So pretty decent little change for businesses. But on the overhaul, Steve, this was an hour-long talk, and I didn't think there was an awful lot in it.
No, I didn't think there was an awful lot in it. I was looking for the kind of big move, and obviously the thing that kind of jumped out at me, partly because it was the headline thing on the BBC, not just because it's relevant to me, was the kind of childcare thing, and in big letters, 30 hours free childcare for children over 9 months, and if you scroll down enough and read the small print enough, it's from 2025 in total. And as someone with an 8-month-old, it'll be 9 in a week months old, so 30 hours of free childcare would have gone over quite nicely. But I guess when I think about this, I'm okay with this starting from 2025. I mean, the way I think about this is it's not the case that I'm likely to get an unexpected boost from this. And complaining that I'm not going to get an unexpected boost from this seems kind of churlish, to be honest. I mean, anyone who had kids at the time that I did knew what the kind of child tax credit and so on allowances are and were. And you chose to have kids on that basis, pretty much. Nothing's gone away in terms of childcare hours that are allowed. So I think I'm pretty much getting what I expected to get at the time we decided to have hours, or at least try and have hours as we went about it. So I'm all right with the thought that, yeah, okay, anyone setting out now might be in a different situation. They might have a different consideration to make of, can we afford this, because they're expensive things, kids, especially if you have more than one, I suppose, which a lot of people do, and I don't, at least not yet. But that was the thing that jumped out at me, and it struck me as a bit of a non-story, partly because you made a better point about that to me in the chat when we were talking about it before. There wasn't a huge amount else that came this way. I was pleased to see there wasn't an ISA reduction here. I didn't think there was going to be. That was only stuff, when we talked about it before, we said it was only from a think tank that had suggested, hey, look, this would be a good idea. No sense that the government either should or was going to listen to them. Energy bills fixed for another 3 months, I think, is... and I'm not particularly critical of this point, because it is what it is. I think it's probably quite cheap. People's energy bills don't tend to be that high. As I understand, it expires in April, I think, this one. So it will go through May, June, July. And I don't think people's energy bills tend to be terrifically high during those months. So capping them is unlikely to cost a huge amount. And there's a good sense in which, well, okay, look, if it's not going to cost you very much, maybe you should cap the damn things. But I'm also convinced, I don't think that's a kind of huge spend and push there. I think the kind of real work was done capping them over, well, February and the likes of that sort of thing. So I didn't think there was an awful lot going on there. Corporation tax going higher made me a little bit suspicious. But apart from that, the Office for Budgetary Responsibility talking very positive things. Inflation down, growth existing for one thing, but growth kind of steady and up. And, everywhere else I look, the UK is not flavour of the month with kind of economic forecasters.
It was very much an adults in the room kind of budget, wasn't it, in comparison to the mini budget, the disastrous mini budget and things like that. This felt like normal Tory kind of budgets, but the one that jumped out at me, Steve, was the removal of the lifetime allowance on pensions. Now, it was kind of veiled as a way to keep consultants and senior doctors working a little bit longer in the hospitals, because what happens is these people, they're on a defined benefit pension, which gets to a certain amount of cash, gets to in the millions, and they start getting taxed a lot to the point where it's not worth them working anymore. Removing that upper limit basically allows them to continue working without getting the big tax bills, and and there's an incentive to stay in work when they were essentially being forcibly retired by this tax. But it's also, let's not lie to each other here, a very friendly tax to people who generally vote Tory, people who would quite likely have more than $1 million in their pension, and the ability to shuffle 60k into it per year rather than 40 will help that compounding effect happen greatly for will accelerate the compounding effect for Tory voters. Labour have come out and said that they'll rescind this, Steve, if they come into power. Starmer said this was essentially a gift for the rich, which, I mean, he's not wrong, it is, but I think there's more to it than... look, Labour are going to play to their market. They know exactly what they're going to say. Their core of voters will respond to this as being told this is essentially a gift for the rich people, and it's hard to deny that it is. It isn't, but it is. It is also probably needed policy in terms of the NHS. So that is one of the reasons why senior doctors and consultants are leaving the NHS. There are other issues that they need to address: buildings falling down, not enough staff, junior doctors not getting pay rises, nurses not applying for roles, massive open positions for long periods of time, creeping privatisation, bidding incredibly low prices to win services and then running them into the ground. There's a lot of reasons why people are leaving the NHS, but this is one of them, and it's hard not to give them a little bit of a, congratulations, you've solved one of the 10 issues you've got to solve.
This is very unlike you. I say that as someone who has no interest in attempting to add 60k to their pension this year. I mean, I'm interested in it, and I'd very much like to, but I'd like to do a whole lot of things that are a lot more likely to happen than that. I kind of don't like that style of politics. I'm not going to wander too far from the stuff that we normally talk about here, but in general, I don't like the politics of people are helping that guy and not me. I mean, I don't really care that people who are going to have kids 2 years down the line, assuming these come into effect and stay in effect, will get more free childcare than I had. Good for them. I'll find a way to figure it out from my sort of thing. I feel more strongly about when stuff gets taken away from me, I guess, than when it gets given to people elsewhere. So I would feel I'd probably get annoyed about an ISA cap or something like that. I wouldn't care so much about tax cuts for, I don't know, corporations, not in this case, but and so on.
I think there are ways to have done this in a more, if you wanted to get an excuse out of Labour's mouth, one of the ways to do this would have been to lift the lifetime cap, but stop contributing at 1.03 million or whatever it is here. The government will, they'll contribute their part. If you put in, the government will contribute their part up to 1.03 million, and after that point, you're free to accumulate it on your own if you wish, but we will no longer contribute. Then what would Labour have to complain about?
It's a good question, I guess. I mean, they'd find something, and the other way around, whatever Labour do, the Conservatives will complain about. That is very much the job of opposition, I suppose, and that's the way it kind of works in here. You read the sentence often, critics disagree, or sentences that begin with the expression critics disagree. I mean, of course they do. That's their job. It's what makes them critics. I sort of try to think a little bit. I tend to take my time in thinking about these things a little bit more, I guess. But do you have any other thoughts on the budget, Steve? What else? Anything catch your eye?
Nothing really. I didn't, like I say, I mean, I listened to it for the full hour, and I kind of thought we as investors got out of it relatively unscathed. I think our kicking came in the mini budget with the changes to dividend tax and the changes to capital gains. So I was quite pleased that we basically had a quiet budget, which is the best we could really have hoped for, I think.
Yeah, I think I didn't see anything here that particularly upset me or agitated me in this budget. Like I say, for a brief moment there, my heart skipped as I thought, oh great, 30 hours of free childcare. I'll mention the point that you mentioned because I thought it was a good one. My following thought from that was, cool, 30 hours of free childcare. Now, can I find a damn nursery place? No, I can't for mine. So there is a real question.
But that's only going to get worse. Yeah, and that's only going to get worse now, isn't it? Because now they're artificially creating, and the reason they're staggering it is because they're hoping they're going to be introduced some kind of golden hello that gets people into the industry. I would say it's not a desirable industry to be in, especially when they're saying it used to be that you could have 4 kids per, I'm going to call them a minder. I hope that doesn't offend anybody. I don't really know what the official term is, but 4 kids per minder. And they're actually stretching that now to 5. That's one of the ways they're trying to open up new spaces. But like 5 kids under 3 per member of staff, that sounds terrible.
Yeah. There are, of course, specialist childminders who presumably do go by that title. That's an avenue we're exploring at the moment. One of the things we've noticed is that the one of ours who has space predictably doesn't take childcare vouchers, basically, which is part of the reason why he has space, I think. So quite a lot of sort of 3+s roll on to nursery stuff, and he has kind of more openings coming up, and it doesn't matter that he doesn't take childcare vouchers. There's, inevitably demand for his services.
Fair enough. We had one of the guys at work, he's got 2 kids under 3. He came bouncing into the office after hearing it on his radio, but he didn't hear the 2025 bit, Steve, when they'll both be outside of the bracket. And I was only too pleased to tell him.
There you go. It's a service you provide there, stamping on people's dreams, not just people who have their ISAs with free trade. Okay.